Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of TLFC. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at the 2024 Lamar Hunt US Open Cup. So we're going to take a look at the history of the cup, we're going to take a look at why this year's cup is so controversial, and then we're going to go ahead and pick who we want to win this year's cup. Before we get into that, I did want to mention that our giveaway is still live, so stick around to the end of the video. Once we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're going to be going ahead and giving that away. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the 2024 Lamar Hunt US Open Cup. So what is the US Open Cup? So the US Open Cup, officially known as the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup, named after American businessman Lamar Hunt, who is actually the original founder of the AFL, which eventually merged with the NFL to form the modern NFL we know today. He was the original owner of the Kansas City Chiefs. He was actually the original founder of the MLS and the original founder of the predecessor to the MLS, the NASL. So he was a very influential man in American sports and especially in soccer. So it's pretty fitting that the cup is named after him, but we can make a whole video on Lamar Hunt. We're not going to do that. So let's go ahead and back and talk about what the cup is actually about, which is actually the United States' oldest running national domestic tournament. So it's basically a competition where every professional soccer team in the country has an opportunity to compete to find out who the best professional soccer team is in America. So if you're familiar with the FA Cup in England, it's very similar to that. The FA Cup is the world's oldest national soccer contest. So this is basically our version of the FA Cup. So the cup held its inaugural competition back in 1913 to 1914, and back then it was actually known as the National Challenge Cup. The original winners were Brooklyn Field Club, who received their trophy from Thomas Dewar. Yes, the founder of the famous Scottish Dewar Scotch whiskey was the original donator of the cup to the tournament. He wanted to help grow the sport in America. And it was actually the cup that was used from 1914 all the way until 1979. So it was used for a long time. It has been since replaced by a couple different iterations, and now it is currently the Lamar Hunt Cup. So most of the early winners of the tournament are actually clubs that no longer exist. For example, the two winningest clubs in the history of the tournament who have both won it 5 times are Maccabi Los Angeles, who existed from 1971 to 1982, and then Bethlehem Steel, who existed from 1907 to 1930 in Pennsylvania. So both those clubs are now defunct, and honestly, the tournament has pretty much been dominated from 1996 forward by MLS teams, where MLS teams have won every single year, with the exception of 1999, when the now defunct, they dissolved last year, Rochester Rhinos won in 1999. So yeah, the tournament now is dominated by MLS teams. There's actually 3 MLS teams that have won the tournament 4 times. That's going to be Seattle Sounders, Sporting Kansas City, and Chicago Fire. So they're all trying to catch up with the 2 defunct teams who have won it 5 times. And the tournament was also expanded quite a bit since its introduction. There were very few teams in the early tournaments. By 2012, the tournament was up to 64 teams, and then reached its peak in 2022 at 103 teams. Which brings us to this year, where unfortunately the tournament will be taking a step back because only 8 MLS teams will be competing this year for the first time since the MLS has joined in 1996. So why are only 8 MLS teams competing? So in December of last year, the MLS announced that its teams would no longer be competing in the US Open Cup, and their MLS Next Pro teams, which play in the 3rd tier of American soccer, would be replacing their first tier or their first senior teams. The MLS specifically claims that the fixture congestions, player load, and onerous hosting fees were the major contributors to the decision. The MLS Commissioner Don Garber specifically said that he thinks the US Open Cup is a very poor reflection of what it is that we're trying to do with soccer at the highest level.
Yeah, right.
Just a perfect example of how much the MLS Commissioner does not understand true soccer culture and is genuinely only interested in promoting the MLS. Thankfully, later in December, the US Soccer Federation rejected the MLS request to not play in the US Open Cup this year. So a deal or a compromise was actually struck up a few months later, where they decided that any team competing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup will not have to compete or will not be competing in the US Open Cup. So that means there will be 8 MLS teams represented by senior squads, while 11 will be represented by their MLS Next Pro squads. That leaves 10 MLS teams completely unrepresented and 21 MLS teams not sending their first team. So why does it matter? So I would say that this is a decision that has made a lot of US soccer fans upset. And honestly, primarily just because it fits the narrative that the MLS is more interested in monopolizing the sport in America than growing it. I think something that the average American might not understand is that our soccer culture and system is just set up so we'll always be second best at the sport. The MLS is a closed league, meaning there is no relegation or promotion. Every single year, the same teams compete against the same teams. There is zero consequence in the MLS for getting last place, other than maybe you won't fill your stadium and you won't sell as many tickets. In Europe, as you'll know if you watched my video from last week, if you get last place in your league, you're gone. You get relegated, you're sent down to the lower league. The reason you get sent down to the lower league is because you're not good enough to play in the top league, and you prove that by getting last place. This forces players, coaches, everybody involved with the team to be better. Every training session matters. Every game matters. Every point matters. The game is held at a much higher standard.
I have standards.
And here in the United States, because we don't hold that game to the higher standard, it shows in the level of play. And that is why so many young American players are leaving to go play in Europe, because they are held to that standard there. In Europe, you can't just collect a paycheck and be fine at the end of the day. You might lose your job and your livelihood, and that's just the reality of it. Instead, here in the US, there's zero fear of failure. A team playing in the second division has no chance at promotion or relegation, and they're basically just forced into 3 options. They have to scrape by in the second or third tier of American soccer. They get hopefully absorbed by the MLS and become an MLS franchise, or the MLS comes in to town and places a team in the market that they have already established, and they're forced to fold, which is exactly what happened to my hometown team, San Diego Loyal. Now, I'm not here to hate on the MLS. I will be a San Diego FC fan when they come to town, but I am here to gripe about the US soccer system, and the MLS currently is not helping that. So many of us are already soured towards the MLS, and then they go ahead and leave the oldest tournament in the country, and that really just doesn't help their cause. The entire point of this tournament is so that the little guy has a chance to beat the big guy. I mean, look at the match between Coventry City and Manchester United last week. Coventry City has no business being in the FA Cup final. Granted, they do play in the second tier of English soccer, and they're a very good side, don't get me wrong, but that is what makes that game exciting, is that a team that shouldn't be there is playing against a perennial powerhouse in Manchester United. Honestly, without that dynamic, the entire appeal of the competition is lost. So with the MLS teams leaving, there's really not as much appeal to watching the tournament as a whole. And that's really what they want, because they want all eyes on MLS. So honestly, it really matters that MLS left the tournament. It just shows a complete disregard for, soccer traditionalism. And it just shows that MLS just wants to be the NFL, and they want to have a monopoly on the sport, and, all professional sports will be within MLS. And, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love American sports, and I love the structure of American sports, but this is not an American sport, and people who love the sport for what it is want this. We want this pyramid structure where, a local team, you can go cheer for your local team and have a chance at being one of the big dogs one day, playing against the top of the top and, being the champion of champions, winning the highest tier. That's the dream, and that's what people want in this country. So if you're not really familiar with this, I did speak about this a little bit in my last video when it comes to the show Welcome to Wrexham. So that show's on FX. It covers the purchase of a Welsh professional soccer team that was competing in the 5th tier of the English soccer system. Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, you've probably heard of them, purchased the team, and they've been trying to push the team up through the tier system to make it to the Premier League. Over the last 3 years, they've already pushed the team up through 2 tiers, so they're up to the 3rd tier. And that is something that we're missing here, and it really helps to grow the community, and it definitely helps to grow the sport. So if you haven't checked that show out, I would highly suggest it. It just kind of gives you an idea of, some of the culture that we're missing out on, and, how it could be here if we had some of the right people, in charge of US soccer. So who is still in this year's cup? So guys, now that I'm done ranting, Let's take a look at the 2024 US Open Cup and how it's been going so far. So here's a look at every single team in the competition for the 2024 year. You'll see there are teams from all three tiers of the US soccer pyramid, with teams from the second and first tier of American soccer entering the tournament in the third round and the round of 32 respectively. The first three rounds of the cup have actually already been completed. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the results of those first three rounds. There's going to be a lot of results here, guys, so feel free to pause and look at them individually, but here are the results from round one. Here are the results from round two. And here are the results from round three. So now that the first three rounds of the cup are finished, which are essentially used just to narrow down teams from the lower tiers, we are entering the round of 32, which means that the remaining USL Championship and MLS sides are set to start the competition. So here's a look at the round of 32 and all the clubs remaining in the tournament. I honestly think I'm probably in the majority when I say I'm cheering for a USL team to win the tournament this year. Obviously, the MLS has dominated this tournament since their, introduction in 1996, but this is the year a team from outside MLS needs to win the cup. I honestly would normally do predictions for something like this, but if I do predictions, I'm gonna go ahead and predict a few MLS teams to win because that's just logical. And then that means I'm gonna have to cheer for those MLS teams because I don't want my predictions to be wrong. So I'm not gonna do predictions, guys, because I wanna cheer just for USL teams and focus on that and hope the MLS teams lose. Let's be clear here, I don't hate MLS. I don't hate MLS fans. I just want them to lose because they're kind of disrespecting the oldest tournament in the country, something that is important to American soccer culture. The owners and the commissioner of the MLS just need to take a good, long, hard look in the mirror and do what's best for the sport in this country. And I hope you guys will join me in cheering for your local USL team this year to win the Lamar Hunt Open Cup. So let's take a look at the USL teams still competing. All right, guys, thanks so much for sticking around for another video. I hope you guys liked that video. Sorry it was a little bit on the ranty side, but I feel like it needed to be done. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup. Now that the end of the video is here, we're gonna go ahead and talk about our giveaway. So at 1,000 subscribers, we're gonna be giving away this Tag 10 Cristiano Ronaldo card, and we're gonna be giving away this Lionel Messi Inferno Parallel. And this card will be graded by Tag by the time we reach 1,000 subscribers, so both of these will be graded. So yeah, if you guys like Messi, if you like Ronaldo, please consider subscribing. But other than that, thank you guys so much for stopping by. I really, really appreciate you watching another video, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.